2023 showed the world that as much as the multipolar narrative is gaining traction, superpower politics still dominates geopolitics. Rest of the world closely follows how the great powers engage among themselves. The United States and China are the undisputed great powers at the moment, and their rivalry dominated headlines almost all of this year. Starting with February, US-China ties were upended by what Washington claims were Chinese surveillance balloons flying over the United States. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken called off a planned trip to China, in fact. Thereafter, due to the alleged surveillance balloon, and tensions were high. The coming months saw tensions rising further. China's Defense Minister Li Shangfu turned down a meeting with US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during the Shangri-La Defense Dialogue in Singapore. The very next day, a Chinese Navy ship cut across the path of an American destroyer in the Taiwan Strait, and the entire world took notice. 2 months later, we saw some engagements finally taking place. On September 9th, US President Joe Biden had a brief exchange with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, while both were at the Group of 20 summit in New Delhi. A week later, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held a 12-hour-long talk with Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi in Malta. 20 days later, on the 9th of October then, Chinese President met US Senate delegation led by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. This was the first congressional delegation to visit China in 4 years. Now, just when we thought the two superpowers were working towards rapprochement, the United States broadened its export controls to stop China from acquiring advanced computer chips and the equipment to manufacture them. Finally, days before the big meet between Biden and Xi, top Chinese diplomat Wang Yi met US counterpart Antony Blinken in Washington, as the two sides laid the groundwork to hammer out the details for a Biden-Xi summit. And that brings us to the big day. After a year of strained ties, US President Joe Biden finally met visiting Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. This closely watched meeting came almost 1 year after the leaders last met. Despite not achieving a joint statement or formal cooperation declaration, the summit ended on a positive note. The two countries also agreed to resume military-to-military communication, which was a huge development as military links were cut by China last year after then US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a visit to Taiwan. In San Francisco, President Xi Jinping said after the meeting that the door to talks between the two great powers cannot be closed again.